Welcome to the 6.5 Insiders Edition. I'm Daniel Newman, your co-host today, joined by my ever-present partner in 6.5, Patrick Moorhead. Patrick, how are you doing today?
Daniel, I'm doing great. We had a little rain here, but Austin, Texas, but it's nice that it's in the 70s, and my gosh, it even went into the 60s. It's almost winter here. I can't believe that.
You know, you're talking to a guy from Chicago, Pat, so I feel very little sympathy for your 60s and 70s. And I'm glad you got some rain. That seems really important. You can tell that you and I are struggling with the not traveling we're doing, because now we've resorted to talking about the weather, which is just fantastic. But
I know it's pretty weak. We used to talk about our travel conquests 45 weeks a year, and now we're talking about the weather. Or, I don't know, I've lost a bunch of weight. I'm not going to say this publicly, but I've lost a bunch of weight. I feel healthier. And I don't think I'm going to be in airports 45 weeks a year when the COVID thing is over.
Well, you look good, you sound good, and I'm glad, because these shows take a ton of energy because we get to talk to some really great people. And this show in particular, I'm very excited about. Our Insiders Edition is always great. We have some of the world's most prolific executives from tech companies that are changing the world, and this one will be no different. And before we bring Rene Haas from ARM onto the show, Pat, I just want to say I'm really excited about this one. You and I, over the last several months, have had CEOs, presidents, top executives from many of the Fortune 500 companies. But over the last few weeks, ARM in particular has been a headliner in the news. Some really big acquisition news around the company. And we're going to have a chance to talk to Renee about that. But geez, I mean, how timely to have one of the top executives at a company that's so influential in what's going on in pretty much every device that we use every day to stay connected to the world.
We've always said chips are eating the world, and I know the software people want to say software is eating the world, which it is, but maybe we can both agree that they're both eating the world.
Well, you need them both, but that software, it's not going to run without a chip. So I guess we got to go to the very, very top of the stack to figure out where things end up landing. Well, without further ado, Rene Haas, welcome to the 6.5 Insiders Edition. We are so excited to have you join us here today.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Glad to be here.
So Rene, quickly, tell us a little bit about yourself, your role at ARM, and just let's set the stage for this conversation. We've got some great questions lined up for you.
Yeah, sure. So talking about the weather, I am in sunny California where the skies are blue. They're not orange. They're not smoke-filled. Today is actually a very nice day here in the Bay Area. I work for ARM. I've been with ARM about 7 years. I've had a fun career here at ARM where, although I've been with the company 7 years, relating to Pat a little bit, I've spent the majority of the years outside of the country, spent some time in China, and was also in the UK for 3 years and just came back to the Bay Area where I've lived here for about 25 years. I've been with ARM, as I said, about 7 years. I manage our intellectual property products group, or the acronym we call IPG, which is basically all of the semiconductor IP that we license to partners, the CPUs, the GPUs, the NPUs, the software. I manage the engineering, the go-to-market, sales, everything that makes that business go. And before ARM, where I've been 7 years, and it's been a great run, I spent 7 years at Nvidia. So the news of the last week or so has some special meaning for me since I've spent the last 15 years of my career, as I said, at both those two companies.
Yeah, Renee, it was great to get to know you at NVIDIA and then even meet with you more prolifically at ARM. And here's the great part. You've worked at both. And as Daniel precluded here, it was the story last week and is moving into this week that NVIDIA wants to acquire ARM. Both of us did multiple interviews. You did a bunch of interviews. I was on CNBC. Daniel was on a bunch of TV shows. And there was a lot of discussion talking about the big opportunity that's here. But, as in life, things aren't always conflict-free. I was curious, were there elements of the conversation that might need clarified out there? I saw a few of those threads. I was responding to them myself.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. We're very excited. The potential combination combination of the two companies in terms of everything that NVIDIA has done around GPU computing, all the success they've had with artificial intelligence and such. They've been a wildly successful company, obviously, over the last number of years. And at ARM, we've been really focused on a number of the end markets where there's been a lot of really exciting growth as well. ARM has been well known for obviously being in the smartphone space, but we've also had some really, really great progress in the data center around autonomous, around automotive and IoT. And when you just think about how complex these devices are, how computing touches our lives, and I think probably the greatest piece of evidence around that is just, the pandemic, right? In terms of where we would be or wouldn't be without advent of technology. The fact that we're able to do this podcast via Zoom and do it rather seamlessly and the cameras just work and everything sets up is just a testament to the fact that technology is just so central to everything we do. And when we think about what's going on in terms of the future technologies that are enabling all kinds of innovation, the sky's the limit. So we're super excited about it. We're also happy to your point, Pat, to get in front of a little bit of the commentary about what this might mean to the industry, and I'll put my ARM hat for a moment about our partners. Now, a lot was written, during the rumor period about what this might mean and what the impact might be, and we obviously couldn't respond to anything because they were rumors and we didn't know whether it was going to happen or not. But I can say, post the acquisition, the one thing that we've been very, very open with our partners and our customers has been the fact that the ARM business model is not going to change. It's been very successful for the company for 30 years. There's no motivation for us to change it. In fact, the beauty of the ARM ecosystem is around the partnership model and the fact that it's an open system that partners can write software to and develop products on, and it's open. And NVIDIA has no intent to change that. They've talked about it rather publicly. We have as well. We've talked to our partners about it. That's probably one single thing I'd want to kind of get out there is that people look at this and say, oh my gosh, everything's going to change. And it just doesn't make sense to do that, on the most practical level, right? I mean, NVIDIA has paid a lot of money for the business. And at the same time, the value of the business is around what we've established for the last 30 years. So that's probably the single biggest thing that if I had to continue to talk about, it would be reinforcing the fact that the business model and how we operate is just not going to change.
You hit it on the head there, Renee, and I was almost going to jump in and say something, but you said it right in time. I believe Jensen is pragmatic about it. I believe there are some very strong synergies. There's certainly going to be a lot for the industry as a whole to look at. But an investment of this size, the largest semiconductor deal in history, was not made or decided upon without a lot of scrutiny and a decision that it needs to continue to return value to shareholders. It needs to bring value to the industry. And I don't think that Jensen's going to look to see that dissolved by making some decision to make it unfriendly to all the partners and licensees that ARM has built out over the past decades. And the company is, I think it's going to be better. I think there's a great opportunity. So I'm excited to see how it all turns out. Now, we want to use this time to talk about some other things, specifically some things that are going on related to IoT, security, and a certification that ARM has developed. We're seeing ARM's technology in billions of devices now, with IoT proliferating, with so much technology and data at the edge and so much data being collected. Security continues to be a bigger and bigger topic. So I'm going to start broad, and Pat and I are going to whittle down, and we're going to get narrower and narrower, Renee. Let's talk about digital transformation. I know it's a buzzword. I actually just wrote my 10 trends for 2021 on this topic on Forbes. So it's a trend I like to write about. But IoT has transformed pretty quickly. And I'd love to get your take on kind of what changes we're seeing as a result of the IoT and the transformation. And what adjustments do you think companies need to make to adapt?
It's a good question. It's a great topic, right? So when you talk about the digital transformation of the IoT industry. And as you said, that's quite a buzzword. And what does that exactly mean relative to what these devices are and what they do? I think at the highest level, these devices that are all across our home were largely analog devices that had no computer interface, and they had no interface in terms of how they access data. And since you're going to dig a little bit deeper later in the conversation, I'll up-level a bit. I've got a vacuum cleaner in my house, right? That vacuum cleaner a few generations ago had an on and off switch, and that was it. The vacuum cleaner that I've got near me has a bunch of sensors. It has a battery meter. It has a whole bunch of different modes it can run. It's got a user interface. To the layman, that looks like a pretty cool vacuum cleaner with a nice little digital interface. Put a communication device in that vacuum cleaner, which the next generation will have, a Bluetooth sensor and stuff, and that's now a computer. And that's now a computer that can be hacked. That computer can be interfered with. That vacuum cleaner that looks fairly innocent sitting against the wall is now a digital device in your home. So when you start thinking about these digital devices, you look back 5-8 years and say, oh my gosh, do I have to think about security in a vacuum cleaner? Is my vacuum cleaner going to get hacked going forward? Absolutely. And what we're going to see is all these devices that are either in your home or in your business, in your car, are small computers that access data, that are communicating to the outside world, and have to think about security the very same way you think about it with your PC or your mobile phone.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that. We talk about trillions of devices, and, we saw what happened when a botnet got out and hit all of the DVRs out there in the United States. It almost took down Amazon. And Amazon, I think we can all argue, has the broadest cloud footprint of anybody. And that's pretty scary when you think about hundreds of thousands and then to trillions. Why now? Why all this discussion about IoT security? Is it we finally woke up and realized what we were about to unleash on the planet? I remember a day when people didn't want to add 5 cents to a dollar SoC for consumer devices to keep it secure.
It's interesting, right? Because on one level, it's somewhat obvious in that if you put a communication sensor on any device and you allow it to connect to the outside world and have data come in and out of the device, you have to worry about security. And many of these devices that were designed years and years ago just was not really thought about in the fundamental design. Right? You think about it in terms of a PC or a handset, but relative to a vacuum cleaner or a set-top box or some of these other areas, they just weren't designed into the products. They just really weren't thought about it. And going forward now, that's all changed. And it's a completely different paradigm in terms of how people think about designing these devices and how to ensure that security is part of the element. And by the way, it's done very differently when you're talking about a vacuum cleaner or a blender or a toaster, because the interfaces are different, the APIs are different, how you access the product is different. It's a very different approach. It's very, very necessary, but at the same time, it's not immediately obvious in terms of how you go about and do that. So it's one of the areas that we're very, very, very keen to be talking to partners about.
I just want that coffee and bacon IoT app, the one that, you smell bacon and the coffee's next to your bed and it knows, but I want it all to be automated. I want AI. I want it to know when I'm going to wake up. I don't want to have to set a timer. That's not my thing. But in serious, so it's becoming more fundamental. The industry is becoming more aware, but how is this going to impact the industry now? From consumers to OEMs, software ecosystems, SIPs, now that it's becoming a priority, what does that mean for all these different players?
Well, at the design level, and essentially with ARM, that's where we interface most closely with our customers and partners. And these are the people who design the actual products. They design the SoCs, they design the chips that go into the end products, and then ultimately that work across the systems. One of the cool things about ARM is that we have the opportunity to talk to everybody. We talk to silicon partners, we talk to OEMs, we talk to the software solution providers, and it's really all about how do I think about the security components of these systems at time zero. And that is at the time that I'm actually designing the product, the time I'm actually building it and architecting it. How do I think about incorporating it? What do the solutions need to look like? How do I assure upstream that these products are secure? It just really starts, again, with the fact that security is one of the very first things that people now are thinking about relative to designing the solutions for these products that go into everything in our everyday lives.
It's so funny. I can't believe we used to debate whether we needed security in there. And the one thing we found out with the fishing tank, and I think it was the Home Depot, is that's how it was hacked, was through something that you didn't think would be connected, that was connected, that probably the SoC in that probably cost about $5, and they lost about $150 million in value. So ARM is an IP provider, doesn't make the actual chip, but is a lot of the brains and intelligence that is going to go into those trillions of endpoints. How do you see ARM's role in that, Renee? Right, on one side, you've got laissez-faire and, okay, here it is, everybody go at it, security du jour, to heavy-handed, maybe on the other side, to maybe orchestrator in the middle. How does ARM want to play this?
A lot of companies like to think they're very, very unique and they're unlike any other company, and in many cases they're right. We are very unique as well. And one of the things that makes us extremely unique is breadth, the hardware and software software ecosystem that we work with. Just by way of scale, ARM partners in the last year shipped a combination of over 25 billion chips. And ARM history, our partners have shipped over 180 billion chips. And if you start to think about the population of people on Earth, 7 billion people, and you do the math, there was once an axiom that said ARM had shipped enough components for any person on Earth. Depending on your math, I think we've shipped more components with our partners than all the people who have ever lived on Earth. And that gives us a unique view into what the industry needs, what the industry is looking for. We watch that very carefully. We take that very, very seriously. So we, not only provide solutions to our partners to build secure SoCs, but we also feel it's our responsibility to work across the industry ecosystem and partnership and be a leader in terms of the shared responsibility around security. That is, listen to what our partners are asking for, listen to everyone who's inside that value chain, again, whether it's a chip guy or an OEM or someone building software solutions, and really be the shepherd, if you will, around what are the things that need to take place. And we do some solutions. So we obviously have the underlying IP, the processors and such, and we do some of the security elements such as root of trust and crypto for allowing the product solutions to be very, very secure. But at the same time, we also have stepped forward and tried to do some things that were helping people understand that these products are indeed secure. So we started an initiative a number of years ago called the Platform Security Architecture, and we were joking about its acronym earlier, so I'll let Daniel comment about that later. But think about it as a underwriter's laboratory seal. And in fact, UL is one of our partners around the certification that essentially allows partners to certify on different levels that the devices they are building are compliant to an architecture, they're compliant to a set of guidelines, and depending on the level of certification, you can have assertion to compliance to they've actually been tested in the lab against software hacks, or they've been tested in the lab against software and hardware hacks. So we have different levels of certifications, 1, 2, and 3. A number of partners like Rene Haas, like Cypress, like ST, names that who have had their products certified. And what this will do is give assurance to people upstream that when they start looking at buying their vacuum cleaner or buying their dustbuster, I know it sounds a little bit crazy, but you'll know the fact that they are actually secure. And that is going to be increasingly important for all the reasons we talked about. So back to the question about our role, we think we have two roles. We have one role to provide those solutions to our partners to build the products, but we also have the higher level initiative to drive things across the industry because it's a shared responsibility. It's not something we can do by ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because, Renee, I would say there's a lot of ecosystems that talk about security and they talk about the ability to guard against major incidents. But, you guys have really done the work to make sure that you're prepared. And so, I think there's a pragmatism to that, to not just talking, but walking the walk. And based on the experience, the partnerships, the testing, I like what you're talking about with PSA, and we're going to hit that more in a minute. No jokes from me, Renee. I'm not going to make any jokes. I do that offline. Everybody that listens to this podcast knows I'm always serious. It's said with humor, so no one can see my face because it's audio. But anyways, you guys also, we're going to talk more about PSA, but you're also doing an event. And so we like to, here on the Insider Edition, give you a chance to show off your wares a little bit. And you have an event coming up called Dev Summit. Curious how, an event like that can help, carry this message forward and help solve some of these ongoing challenges around security.
Yeah, so this year we are running a program that we would have done live. So it's COVID, so everything is new. So we used to do a show every year, an event in San Jose. We called it TechCon, done in October in San Jose, live event, about 5,000 folks. So we've rebranded that to a program we call Dev Summit. But for those who are big fans of TechCon, don't be worried. TechCon has not gone away. It's now just been renamed and rebranded Dev Summit. And we branded it on some level because of the obvious first part of the word is around developers. And we were talking earlier about the ARM ecosystem and the pervasive of all the devices that are out there. The vast majority of the chips that ship with ARM have our CPUs, and our CPUs are only as valuable and powerful as the software that's written to them. So when you think about the broad developer community that could be attracted to ARM, we just thought it was important to put an increased emphasis on developers. So that's why we renamed TechCon Dev Summit. Dev Summit goes live in a couple of weeks. It is virtual. We had about 5,000 folks or so who attended TechCon. We're looking for a bigger number than that this year since it's going to be virtual. You'll have keynotes, you'll have tech papers, things of that nature. And it'll also allow for a lot of interaction around the developer community for all the products that ARM works with and our partners. There will be a heavy slant towards IoT, as you can imagine. And these are all the things from doing small dev boards for developers to things that makers would use to a whole bunch of different areas. And we'll obviously be talking about things we talked about relative to security, which will be really, really important. So Dev Summit should be pretty cool. I think it's free. So there'll be keynotes from Simon Seegers, our CEO, myself, some guest appearances that I think folks might find intriguing. So I won't give that away. So people should tune in. And then some really, really great technical content that people I think will get a great deal of benefit from.
Yeah, Dev Summit is not new. I think this is the 16th conference that you've had. I've been to about, I think, 7 tech summits. I think I've talked to you and Simon at a few. And what I've appreciated is that you've raised the game on content, and it's really a couple of different audiences, from Uber tech to management who wants to really understand from the company standpoint where you're growing. And I appreciate that you hold up your biggest announcements for this show. So I'm expecting a big one here. So back to being PSA certified. We talked about as an example of how ARM helps drive industry collaboration around IoT and security. What exactly is PSA certified again? You talked about it has different levels, but why is it and how is it unique out there in the industry? And I'm also in agreement with Daniel, the notion amongst competing instruction sets, the notion of having 1 trillion devices with no center point to be able to put something in place during a major security incident should scare everybody.
Yeah, so without going into, and one last quick comment on Dev Summit, then I'll answer your question, Pat. It's not somewhat serendipitous, but Nvidia GTC is the same week as Dev Summit. Now we're 2 separate companies, so I'll put the promo out that says, please attend Dev Summit because I think you guys will love it. But yeah, just somewhat bizarrely, those ended up on the same week. Without going into too much of the detail on the PSA nuts and bolts and just sort of talking about a little bit of what the benefits are and why it's important, at their core, there are a number of elements that go inside the SoC that will fundamentally guard the data that sits inside that chip away from software or hardware hackers that can attack it. So it's a specification, kind of starts out with a bunch of things that you need to integrate. And if you integrate these things properly, and we provide a software programming interface to developers of these chips or systems that will access this protected area of the chip, you're going to, A, ensure that the data inside the chip or device is secure. You're also going to be able to ensure that it can't be hacked via software or via hardware, depending on the attributes. But probably even more importantly than the technical underpinnings of what's inside, because we have this certification process, and the certification process really has a number of different guidelines that is a combination of questions that are asked by a lab in terms of did you indeed include all of these elements in your design, all the way up to a series of lab type testing. The end user who buys the end device, or the OEM that's trying to build a bunch of chips to build a system, or the factory that's trying to put together a whole bunch of different robots, the fact that you know that they are PSA certified, you have a level of comfort and confidence and trust that the design guidelines relative to keeping the data secure have been followed. So there's 2 aspects to it, right? There's the aspect of did you put the Lego blocks together relative to the root of trust, the crypto, the attestation, all of the things that the security experts will know in terms of the definitions, in terms of this is what makes it secure. But to transfer it from gobbledygook to, yeah, this actually hangs together and it works and it's been tested and it's been verified and it's been validated, and I can get a level of confidence that what I'm seeing there actually adheres to a guideline. That's what PSA certification is all about. So when we started this, we felt it was really, really important to match the underlying elements of the SoC, all of these little bits and bobs that make the chip go, with a process. And we think PSA going forward is going to be really, really important for all these edge devices that ultimately will all be connected, right? If you kind of bring it back full circle to what does Internet of Things mean, it means all these things now have sensors and communication devices, whether it's Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, LoRaN, they're communicating. And whenever you've got data and whenever you've got a communication channel, you've got a place where hackers can go. So as a result, all these devices are going to need to be secured. And we thought the certification process was really, really important.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Renee. And I was going to ask you a little bit about how you help businesses with PSA, but you nailed it. I mean, you really talked about it, whether you're building systems, the certification should provide a certain amount of understanding and guarantee to those you're selling to as to the level of security. If you're consuming any of these technologies, it's the same. But one thing I think we can all agree upon is that it is certainly becoming a bigger and bigger priority to everybody, as we all want to make sure that our data, our information, our money, our things are safe and secured. So I'm going to fire you a little forward here, and I'm going to set you up with a tap in. But people that hear about this, our community of industry, our leaders from big OEMs that are building things and chip makers and everyone that's using ARM and everyone that's not, how do these companies get started working with PSA?
Yeah, so we've got a lot of information on the ARM website that talks about different ways that you can get started. And it runs the gamut from the IP that we make available, all the little elements that are needed to build the SoC. There's a lot of information there in terms of those products, and you can take a look at that. There's a lot of information in terms of the APIs for developers, in terms of how you can get access to the product. And then there is a lot of information around the certification flow and who those partners are. And I would take a look there. You know, we started this in 2017. It's now 2020. We've got over 50 PSA certified products from 26 different partners. May not sound like a big number when you think about, 26 billion chips shipped, but when you think about starting it in 2017, and I know you guys can both relate to this, there's a time required to getting the IP in the hands of a chip provider, the chip provider to build the chip to go into a system, the system to be able to be built and tested and then certified. So we're thrilled with this number, honestly, and it's only going to get larger. You'll see more and more in devices. Getting started is pretty straightforward. And I would say go to the ARM website. You can search for PSA. There's a whole separate landing site that describes the products, the technologies, and all the things I talked about that run the gamut from the white papers to the cert process to the underlying IP. So we're super excited about it, and we think it's important.
You made a tremendous amount of progress. I wrote about PSA the first time in 2018 during TechCon. Your biggest announcement, I can't figure out which was bigger, Neoverse or PSA. I can't tell, but you had prefaced that with the Security Manifesto, which was a nice way to pave the way, talking about the responsibility of the entire industry to do that. And only 2 years ago, we were debating whether consumer-grade IoT devices needed this. And anyways, hats off to you, Renee, on this.
Oh, thank you. And I would say hats off to the ARM team. I'm just here talking about it. It took not only the entire team at Inside ARM, but the ecosystem and our partnership. And couldn't be more proud. And there's a lot of exciting things to come in this area.
Well, in fairness, you get to be the proxy because you're the one here on the 6.5 Insiders. But Renee, I want to just also on behalf of the 6.5 Insiders and our podcast to say thanks so much. Thank you to ARM. Thank you for yourself for showing up, spending some time with us today. Really enjoyed having you on the podcast.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Look forward to doing it again soon.
Yeah. So for everybody out there that wants to learn more about PSA Certified, about ARM, we're going to throw some links down in our show notes, and please feel free to click on them. Both Patrick and I have been covering a lot from where we started here on the Nvidia ARM. There's a bunch of articles. We'll make sure we link to those. We'll also have some info on Dev Summit. We'll have some info on PSA Certified and what it means. We want to keep everyone out there informed. Renee was a great guest, tons of thorough insights, and just a really good show overall. But unfortunately, for everyone that's having a lot of fun, that's been tuning in, we do have to say goodbye right now. We love having you here. We love our community. Hit that subscribe button. Stick with us for our regular 6.5 podcast editions, but also stick with us for other insider editions. We have great guests coming on the show all the time. But for this one, for myself, for Pat Moorhead, we got to say goodbye. We'll see you later. Have a great day.